Hello everyone, I am your host Ingrid Thompson. Welcome to So You Want to Start a Business, episode number 78. Our guest today is Amanda Abella. I've just re-listened to the whole conversation and it's just one of those conversations where I just didn't want it to end. We kept finding new things to talk about as we were wrapping up. I believe you'll find a terrific conversation to listen in as we talk a variety of business matters while hearing Amanda's business startup story. One of her mottos is, "We're here to be better." And you'll see what that means as we listen in. Anyway, here's how she describes the very beginning of her business, right back there, getting started right back at the beginning.
In the beginning with the personal finance blogging back in 2010, it was just because, honestly, I didn't even know I could start a business. That wasn't a thing. Now everybody's like, be an influencer, be a coach, all this stuff. Like, that did not even exist. I was just trying to get my life together. And a client back then had all these like open articles for personal finance. And I was like, I don't know anything about money. What if I get paid to learn about money? Right. And back then it was like, I made $5 like my first month, like taking an assignment. And I guess that was my first official, like I was hooked after that because I was like, I just made money doing something I like to do.
Making money doing something we like to do. Isn't that what we're all after in our own business? In this conversation, Amanda talks about the way entrepreneurship is one of the very best personal development work you can ever do. She has fought imposter syndrome and she talks about that. She knows how to make money when she needs it. She also talks about controlling expenses in the business and how important it is to spend money wisely on promotion and advertising. She's also super strong about the difference between personal finances and business finances. She's absolutely focused on helping others earn more money in their business. This is a powerful interview with a dynamic business owner who wholly believes that mentorship is extremely valuable because to use her own words, having a mentor compresses time. It's a terrific interview. As always, there's no advertising on this podcast. This episode is brought to you by my book with the same name as this podcast, So You Want to Start a Business. Head over to wherever you buy your books online for a Kindle or a physical book. If you don't already have a copy and you'd like to read an extract, you could go to thestartupsteps.com and there's about 20 pages waiting for you. The full audio version is being made available through the podcast. You may want to cycle back through some of the recent episodes where I'm reading chapters of the book in the podcast, and there are more on the way. Anyway, enough from me right now. Let's listen to what Amanda has to say about starting and running a business of her own and so much more. Are you ready? Let's go.
Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, Amanda. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ingrid. How are you?
I'm great. And we're just talking about what it's like in Miami and what it's like in Sydney. So we're ready for a terrific conversation about Amanda's business. So, Amanda, let's get into it. What business are you in? What is your business?
So I like to call myself a financial expert. That encompasses a lot of things. So one branch of the company, I've been blogging since 2010. Right. So I've got a website, I've got leads coming in. Because of that, I end up doing a lot of spokesperson work and brand partnerships with financial companies. So we've worked with companies like Capital One, Intuit, Florida Prepaid College, which is a college savings program where I live in Florida, Better Mortgage, SunTrust. We've worked with a lot of people in that capacity. Relay Rewards is a recent one. And then because of that, because I was freelance writing and working with so many financial companies, it kind of gave birth to this second branch of the company where we teach bloggers and small business owners the art of branding and sales and marketing. Because a lot of people are like, I want to be an influencer, but they have absolutely no idea what it entails or what they're talking about. They just see people like posting stuff on Instagram and they think money just comes rolling in and suddenly these brands are knocking on your door, or like you've got clients and you're selling high-end coaching programs, and it doesn't work that way. So we kind of demystify that whole process.
That's fantastic. And you're so right. It doesn't go from nobody knows who you are to rolling in the dough, and it just doesn't happen that quickly overnight, and it doesn't happen for everybody either, does it?
No, it doesn't. But those who are willing to put in the work and those who are willing to learn, it'll happen.
It will. And that's exactly what this podcast is about, helping people understand that journey of getting started in a business. So you started blogging in 2010. When did this business actually start?
So I personally feel like the business officially started in 2013 when I quit my last job. But it would take me, yeah. So, but it would take me like 2 or 3 years to really figure out like the model, the structure. So I actually freelanced for a long time.
Yeah.
And I started that in 2010. But this newer branch of it, I think officially in 2013 when I quit my last job.
When you quit that last job. Terrific. So you started this business, because my next question is, why did you start it? And you've kind of answered that for us already. It was in response to what was actually happening and the changes that were going on around you.
Yeah, that was part of it. You know, in terms of this new branch, in the beginning with the personal finance blogging back in 2010, it was just because honestly, I didn't even know I could start a business. That wasn't a thing. You know, now everybody's like, be an influencer, be a coach, all this stuff. Like that did not even exist. I was just trying to get my life together. And a client back then had all these like open articles for personal finance. And I was like, I don't know anything about money. What if I get paid to learn about money? Right. And back then it was like, I made $5 like my first month, like taking an assignment. And I guess that was my first official, like I was hooked after that because I was like, I just made money doing something I like to do.
Yeah.
You know, and that was it. And, you know, it would take me a while to really figure it out. One of the things I teach a lot of my own coaching clients, and I talk about this on the podcast and on the blog, is that when it comes to money and business, there's almost like a lot of detoxing you have to do in terms of what you've been taught about money.
Yeah.
So that's been a journey for me because now I'm doing like the exact opposite of what I thought I should be doing, but I'm making more money than ever. So it's kind of like, what?
That's such a good way of describing it, to detox some of those old ideas. We'll let's come back to that with we'll get through a couple more of these, and then I'm sure we'll unpack some of that what you're talking about there, because I'm fascinated by it. So what did you want from the business from day one? So what was this business going to do for you?
Honestly, for me, it was always financial. In the beginning, so let's go day one blogging. Day one blogging, I just wanted to get my ish together. That was it. I was just trying to find myself. I had no purpose. I didn't know that there was a business there. I was just trying to figure out this adulthood thing. You know, the economy crashed before my eyes. I graduated in 2010 and I started questioning everything.
Yeah.
Right? Which now, like 10 years later, 10 years after the crash, people are like, how did you start figuring this out so young? And to me, it's like, did you not witness the same thing I did? Like, were you not asking the same questions? Like, literally every structure we had fell apart.
Yeah.
How were you not asking these questions?
Yeah.
But that's one area. So in the beginning, it really was just me trying to find myself in sort of like this new world where everything you'd been taught just kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
Through no fault of your own.
Yeah. And, I think certainly in Australia, we didn't feel that crunch of it as much as I know you certainly did in the US. And that, that 2007, 2008, 2009 were pretty tough years for you guys. And then the few years after that. So, I think you're right. Trying to figure out a new way of doing things. And maybe that has been part of the big trigger, that plus the fact that technology allows us to start businesses. And, that there has really been that trigger to say, okay, do this for yourself, because these businesses aren't going to be here. Companies can't offer you what they had. So what can you do with the resources that you've got?
And that's just kind of how it started. I never in a million years imagined it would be, not back then, that came later, but back then I wasn't thinking multiple six-figure business. I wasn't thinking full-time assistant. I wasn't thinking office space. I wasn't thinking any of that.
No. It was just doing something for yourself to figure out how you could get something for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And to hold myself accountable because I was putting it out there publicly.
Yes. Yeah. And that does, it people were then starting to rely on you. People were looking to you to lead them. Very nice, very nice. So you said it felt like it was a real business when you quit your job, your last job. It feels like when it started.
Burned the boats.
It's gone. But when did the business actually feel real? What made it feel real for you?
I would say that process started in 2016 because suddenly it was 3 years of full-time, full-time effort, full-time energy. And I started getting a lot of attention. And suddenly I had the worst imposter syndrome of my life in 2016. I felt like I was crawling out of my skin, right? Because I was so uncomfortable. So I think that's when it really started getting real. Right. And I had to deal with the imposter syndrome stuff first. Right. And then once I got over that, it was like, okay, now it's time to start building systems and scalability. And then once I did that, you know, from 2017 to 2018, we doubled revenue and profits in 12 months, you know.
Wow.
But the first initial sort of like inkling, like, oh my God, this is real, was probably 2016, and it was extremely uncomfortable.
And it was well done for getting through it. So, you know, there you go. So 2010, 2013, 2016, you know, that's 6 years from when it's first started.
You've mentioned imposter syndrome.
How did that show up for you, Amanda? What was that? Yeah.
People were coming to me. I think one of the biggest things I heard was like, this was toward the end of 2000. Was it the end of 2016? Maybe end of 2007. I can't remember exactly when it was right now, but, you know, suddenly like more trolls started coming out, which, for example, or I remember one time I had someone send like a 3-page email telling me how full of crap I am, but I turned that into a Halloween costume. So they're like, you're just a spammy internet marketer. And it was the first time I'd ever put out an income report where I was like, look, I made $10,000 a month. It's the first time I've ever done it. Every time I do that, it triggers the crap out of people.
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
Right.
And then that makes you feel, oh, maybe they're right.
Not in that case, because I was like, who goes out of their way to write 3 pages about how full of crap someone is? Right. But it was still sort of like, wow, suddenly you have way more eyeballs on you than you used to. Like, it was like all this little work, and then suddenly it snowballed. You know, it started sort of like taking off. And then that's doubled, tripled since then. So in terms of, or one of the other things that happened was, you know, I had a meeting with an agent and they're like, this is how much you should be getting paid for brand work. And I had no idea that I had been lowballing myself so much. I just didn't know.
Yes.
Right. They're like, based on what you're doing, this is what you should be making. And I was like, holy crap, like I just didn't know. Right. So then it was almost like I was so accustomed to putting my head down and working that I didn't realize that what I'd been working toward happened. And then I hadn't adjusted for it.
So you were low charging for what you were doing. Isn't that incredible? Yeah. Well, just as well you had that meeting just at that time then, isn't it? And sort of helped you with those. We'll talk about pricing in a moment. So how did you know customers wanted what you were doing? So obviously people were asking you, but how did you know, and how do you know now as you make the changes, and because you were saying that, you know, you've made some changes late last year and, you know, there's a sort of a slight difference to the business, and how do you know, how do you keep your finger on that?
So this is actually, I teach my clients how to do this in Persuade to Profit. So it's a 6-week program where we walk through like market research. So like conception of an idea all the way through product creation or service creation, and then their first funnel. And at the end of the program, what we talk about is how to stay in constant communication with your marketplace. Right. So even just last week, I posted an Instagram story, or I'd sent an email or something, and people were in my DMs and they're like, oh my God, I was just thinking about this. How do you know? Right. And I joke around that I'm psychic, right? But I'm not. I just pay attention.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, or last week I had a sales consultation, and, you know, immediately afterward, it was like vigorous notes because they gave me so much to work with in terms of what people are going through. Yeah. Right. So that's what it is. And this is what I teach my clients. I'm like, I just give the people what they want.
Yeah. Yeah. Pay attention, listen, respond.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So early days, you funded the business by staying in your job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you quit your job. But how did you fund, like each time as you need a little bit more money, where does that money come? You don't have to give us a whole lot of details, but
Oh no, I can tell you exactly what I did. It's quite simple. I can tell you what I did. I just hustle and make some sales. That's it. My capital is sales. That's it. People.
Say it again, Amanda, please.
My capital is sales. That's it. You don't need anything else. People are always like, where do I find an investor and this and that? I'm like, just sell something. Like, you'd get money so much faster.
Yeah.
But to give you a little bit of idea, if I need a little bit of space or a little bit of breathing room, I'm like, cool. I just put this on a credit card. Makes me a little nervous. I got 30 days to figure out where this money is going to come from.
Yeah. And you make some sales.
And I make some sales and I find the money. So that's it. It's just, I just go make money.
Yeah. It's so funny. I was interviewed last week by somebody talking about cash flow, and they were saying, what are some tips for cash flow? And we'd been through, some of those basics about making sure your payments and I said, look, ultimately, if you're running out of money, you make sales. And we came back to it a couple of times and they said, well, what are the other tips? And it's, well, you know what? At the end of the day, if you need more cash in, then you make more sales, because you never really grow a business by adjusting costs, because the costs are always going to be there.
That was a huge mistake for me, because I was writing traditional personal finance articles for massive companies like Wells Fargo and Discover and Credit Karma, Investopedia. I've written for all those guys, right? Yeah. When I was doing a lot more content marketing, done for you content marketing, instead of teaching people how to do it.
Yeah.
And everything was like save. And then when it comes to the business, it's like, wait a minute, it's like the opposite, because you can't save your way into a thriving business.
No.
You can't. You got to throw down money. It costs money to do all this, So oftentimes, and I used to focus on just like the expenses, like what can I bring down? And obviously I still do that. I still have to adjust. If something's not working, get rid of it.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I teach my clients. Like, I don't feel bad because I already spent money on it. I just get rid of it as soon as possible.
Totally.
As soon as I notice, right? So it's not that I don't do that. It's just that that's not where most of my focus is. Most of my focus is on making more money. In fact, when I was onboarding my new assistant, we needed to make a couple of investments while we were building out all the systems on the back end. And I looked at her and I'm like, here's your first money lesson for life, right? She's 23. So at this point, she's like a little sister almost at this point. She's 23. And I'm like, here's your first money lesson. Everything costs money. So just go make money. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny. My husband, I used to work with this woman who had this beautiful white couch in the front of her lobby. And sometimes he used to drop by because we've sort of all become friends now. And in fact, we are. But he used to say, how can I get a job so I can sit on this white couch? And she said, well, generate enough income to pay for yourself and you can have a job here. And, that sticks with me, is that how do you generate money from what you actually do? Because everything, like you said, paying for that assistant costs money. So what is it? And she doesn't have to actually necessarily go actually hustle and make sales, but what is she doing that generates your ability to make more sales? So It's like, how is it your contribution that you build somebody else's business? Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Amanda, so much. You and I are so on the same page. So now, where did new customers come from for you? So in the early days, you were doing, so what's your way of getting new customers?
So when I was still doing content marketing for financial brands, it was pitching them, right? Now what ended up happening, and I didn't realize I was doing it, but once I noticed I was doing it, then I started making the decision to keep doing it. I was a freelance writer for almost 10 years. My name is everywhere. I was getting paid to promote myself, basically, right? So I was like, let me do this while I figure out this other thing over here, right? And I have a lot of clients who come to me in that position where they're freelancing, and they want to start moving away from it and do something more scalable. And I'm like, it's a transition. Don't give up all the freelancing yet, right? Because you're essentially getting paid to promote yourself right now, right? You give that up when the next phase is already making you just as much, if not more money than the freelancing, which is what happened to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Smart.
But I was essentially getting paid to promote myself. So my name is everywhere, right? I had a client who was researching me. She found me on Twitter and she's like, I Googled your name and the first 4 pages of your name is just your stuff.
Wow.
And I'm like, check, right? And I was like, yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
and it's taken a while for you to achieve that. That's
Yeah.
what you're saying, is that you just stay diligent to it, keep putting it out there.
Yeah. And then to the second point, I mean, we've built systems over time. We've built funnels, you know, for a long time it was free, but then free only gets you so far. So people are like, well, how did your social media following grow so fast? I started hiring people and putting marketing dollars behind it. That's it. There's no secret. There's no magic to it. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Right. And then I remember doing that because I went to a sort of panel discussion of like a blogger meetup in Miami a few years ago. And the woman ran an agency and she's like, listen, all these brands that are looking to work with bloggers, they have marketing budgets. Why don't you have a marketing budget? And I was like, oh, snap. That's when I started spending money on Instagram. That's when I started spending money on Twitter. You know, that's when we started learning about more paid advertising. And then, okay, now I'm doing this. Okay, now what am I selling?
Yes. Because you're attracting them. Now what are you selling? Because they're coming to you to buy something. Yeah.
So at this point, I mean, we've got leads coming in every day, like on autopilot, just because of social media and the content that I put out there. And then from there, you know, we take it to the next level. So, you know, we've got all this part automated. Now the next part is, okay, we're doing email marketing. We're setting up phone calls. We're doing this. But there's like a whole system in place. And my team and I, over the last 6 weeks, we got very clear on like, okay, who's doing what part of this system?
Yeah. So so everyone knows what they're doing. There's a system and a process. And, you know, I love you talking about systems and processes, because I think a lot of people want to start their own business so they don't have to do that. But the reality is the only thing that will ever make a business as successful is having really good systems and processes in place. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And like, I'm completely right-brained, creative kid. Like, I had to learn all this stuff. Or like, even still, like my strong suit is not necessarily details and systems. Okay, I hire other people. That is their strong suit, because why am I going to waste my time?
And that's what they love to do. So why would you not get someone to do it? Okay,
why would I try and learn something I literally don't have the talent for? Like, it just doesn't even make sense.
Well, and also it's not the sorts of things that is actually going to generate the best part of your business. I mean, you're in that part of the brain that's creative, that talks to people, that communicates. That's where your strength is. That's your superpower. So that's what you want to spend your time doing. Yeah. Pricing. How did you so you said you started off doing things for free, and then you gradually, you know, you had to charge for, and so how do you decide what a pricing strategy is?
So I think for me, eventually I like to call them a financial come to Jesus, right? And I was like, living costs money, like that's it. So I had to learn how to remove all emotion from it. I had to get really good at boundaries. You know, now I can ask for $10,000 and be like, okay, right? But I had to like work my way up to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But my basic rule is like, the more time and attention you need from me, or if you're using my audience to try and get something, the more it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
It's just a fair exchange of value.
Yeah. And that is a huge value that is worth the money that you charge for it. Yeah. Nice. And that's part of that mindset, isn't it? That you're getting your head around that. So my next question is about an exit strategy, and you may or may not have thought about it yet, but is it something that's on your radar? Like, do you see where this goes eventually?
I don't like doing 5 years. Someone asked me the other day, they're like, do you do 5-year plans? I'm like, they're such bullshit, because I changed my mind 6 months into it anyway.
Well, however, and 5 years, who knows? Honestly,
yeah, exactly.
So far away in the future now, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, we're all making half the stuff up as we go anyway. That's the secret, right? Because we learn as we go. There's no manual to this. However, in terms of exit strategy, I don't know if I'm going to have kids. I don't know. Like, I don't have any of those answers at this point. However, what I have thought about is, okay, what are you going to do if for whatever reason you can't work? I don't see myself ever not getting bored of this, right? But what if you can't, right? So I've already started moving in terms of like, okay, I'm learning how this is going to sustain itself and I'm learning how it's going to make money. So I can start making my next move, which is more like real estate type stuff,
Yeah.
you know? And I started with a syndication literally 2 weeks ago. That was the first phase. And now it's like, so I've thought about it from like the bigger picture, but I haven't thought about it in terms of how am I going to cash out? Like I haven't thought about it that way.
Well, but that's a great, and actually that's a really good, yes, it's not exit as in close the whole thing, but it's how do you remove yourself so that if you're not there, it still continues? Because that's what happens to so many small businesses, isn't it? Is that if it's not them doing it, then there is nothing.
Right.
And that's part of that exit, isn't it? It's kind of like withdrawing yourself a bit. So if you wanted to take 3 months off and go traveling or, have some kind of sabbatical, go study something, how would the business continue to generate income?
Exactly. Like I'm going to Costa Rica in 2 weeks for a retreat. Like that's why I was like, oh my God, I got to hire people by January.
So that you can go. That's right. Okay.
Right.
Let's have some reflection. And you clearly are the sort of person who learns from what happens. And as you said, we're all making this up as we go along these days. So what do you think you'd like to have done differently? What might you have done differently?
I think I would have rather started focusing on earning, right? And more, I think when you look down at the numbers, I remember having this massive moment. And again, this takes time, okay? There's like levels to this, right? But I wish I would have had this realization sooner. And that realization was, I remember maybe last year at some point, I was like going through all these rounds of edits with an editor and the editor was kind of crappy. And the reason I knew the editor was crappy was because I'd been doing this a long time and I'd never had an issue, right? So I was like, nope, that's definitely them, right? And I was like, this is for like what, $500, $600? Meanwhile, I have this other person asking me for something that I could charge 10 grand for. Like, what the hell am I doing?
Yes.
So I think for me, and this has always been the thing, I'm very methodical and I take risks, but I take calculated ones. Yeah. So even my job, I would say I could have quit that 6 months sooner, right? Or I could have quit freelancing sooner, but again, this is all sort of like a process and I had to go through that like sort of mental detox we all have to go through. Yeah. And everyone's just kind of on their own journey. And I don't necessarily regret it because the truth is if I was making this kind of money 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't even have the capacity. I wouldn't even know what to do with it.
Yeah. Which is what happens to some people, isn't it? That money is too quickly and then they don't know. It's interesting that how in retrospect we can see it, but we can't actually see it at the time. I think that's that Steve Jobs quote about the dots backwards or something, that where it's easy in hindsight. But it's good because people can learn from that. I think that's such a beautiful example, Amanda, where you get caught up in this $500, $600 thing here, but you've got your eyes not quite closed, but it's like, why am I not paying more attention to this $10,000 thing over here while I fuss around with this over here? So I think that's a huge lesson. Thank you for that. Is there something you wish you'd known from the start? Because you know how, like you've used that expression that we're sort of making it up as we go. Is there, if somebody could have told you something a bit earlier, like, because the listening audience to this podcast are people thinking about a business or people who are, back there in 2013 land where you were, what if somebody could have told you something?
Personal finances is not the same as business finances. Period. Period.
So, so what works for you personally
is not going to work for you in business.
It's not going to work in business. Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
It'll actually just keep you small. Yeah.
It will keep you. So what's the big difference, do you think, between the two?
I think there's a couple things. So again, I come from the perspective of being in the personal finance space as long as I was. And that's where I started because I had to learn something, So I think a lot of people are in a situation where, they have massive amounts of debt, and I think people are told, oh, you have a spending problem. And some people might, right? But there's also a reality of the situation right now. And I know this just based on interviewing as many people as I have and for articles, for podcasts, for all that stuff. And there's a reality of the situation that if you've got, and this is a problem here in the States, but like if you've got 6 figures in student loan debt and you're making like what, 40 grand a year, really your only solution is to go make more money.
Yeah.
It's not to save and hoard, right? Or the whole like latte factor thing, what you save like $1,000 a year, that's not going to get you a down payment on a house. Making more money will.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I wish someone would have told me that earning is okay, right?
Yeah.
You can earn a lot of money. That's kind of where the focus should be. You know, I think a lot of people are told, oh, you can save your way into a millionaire. And then when you look at the people who have massive amounts of wealth, that's not how they did it.
Yeah, and you know, we are starting here in Australia because, you know, there was a time when our university education was free, but we're the same thing here. You know, there are people coming out of degrees with pretty close to six-figure debt, and we have a buffer where you don't have to pay that back until your salary reaches a certain point, and people deliberately keep themselves under that point so they never have to pay back their loan.
Oh yeah, people do that here too. Like they're going to keep themselves under a point because they don't want to pay more in taxes because they don't. I'm like, don't you understand that as a business owner you get more tax advantages than like someone else? But it's because they've just been taught there's like a certain way of doing things, and people think of it as like, oh, this is like personal finances. No, it's not. Your business is not your personal bank account.
No,
you should not treat it the same way. It doesn't even work the same way.
No, definitely not. No, I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, so who has been over the time, who has been of greatest assistance to you? So, you know, who's helped you along the way? You can either name names or we can, you know, in generalities.
So do you mean like mentors? Because I've had so many.
Well, just that idea. Just that idea in generality, you know, like what roles do mentors play? What has that played for you?
So I've had different mentors for different things. You know, in the beginning, it was really understanding that my thoughts affect my reality. So that was Gabby Bernstein stuff. And then that moved into, okay, understand basic finance. So I had some sort of a understanding. Then it was, you know, evolving past that. That was like, okay, I need someone to help me with systems. And then in the last year and a half, okay, it's just sales, right? So it's been different things that have evolved over time, but mentorship has been so important because it's compressed time.
Yeah. It makes a big difference getting that from someone who knows. So Amanda, because of the sort of work you do, people come to you and say, I would love to start my own business. So what do you say to them? And you've kind of answered this a bit because you've talked about how business finance is different to personal finance, but it's not your role to tell people what to do. But when they come to you and say, you know, I'd love to start a business, what sort of things do you say?
Well, we have a prospecting process, so we make them go through an application first to even see if they have like a general idea. But the first thing we gauge, right, is like, okay, what's the idea? Have you gone to test it out? Usually the answer is no, right? Do you understand how you're going to monetize? Usually the answer is no, right? Or they don't even know what that means. So we start probing and asking those kinds of questions to find out what's going on.
Fantastic. So in your business, who gives you good feedback? I mean, you've got some team members, you've had mentors, you know, you are part of a business community. Where do you get good feedback from?
Our readers. I mean, just this morning we sent out an email called "Seeking Validation Will Destroy You," and oh my gosh, the feedback has been amazing. People like tagging us or like emails coming back. So from the community itself, we get a lot of feedback, and that's how I know I'm onto something. Yeah. But also my team. You know, my team has just last week, one of them was like, part of our job right now is to remind you that you're not doing this by yourself anymore. You have us. We got you. Right.
That's nice. That is fantastic. Yeah, you're not doing this by yourself anymore. That's lovely.
Yeah, so my team, and then, you know, I have an advisor who I speak to, who really helps me through some of the transitions and things, especially the big transitions that we go through. So, you know, I get good feedback from them, and vice versa. I give feedback as well, but basically everybody who's in my orbit and in my environment, we're all kind of on the same page, right? Which is we're here to do better, right? So even with my sales team and my associate coach, we're like, okay, this went right. Here's what we got from this. Here's how we can make it better. Not in making yourself feel bad kind of way, but in a there's more potential kind of way.
Yeah, really nice, really lovely approach to that. No, I like that very much. So 3 characteristics that you have that make you successful in your business.
I am resilient as hell.
Yeah.
That's definitely one. I make decisions very quickly, right? My accountant told me I needed an assistant, a salesperson, and then we would need office space, so I'm not managing people from my house. I got it in a week.
Fantastic.
Right?
Yeah.
I find a mentor who I know is going to help me with something. I invest. I basically like commit first and figure the rest out as I go.
Yeah.
You know, and I find that people just overthink, and they don't trust themselves.
Yeah.
I've learned to make decisions very quickly and move really fast.
Yeah.
So I think that's one. And then number 3 is, this isn't just about me. I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm basically just a vessel for a message.
Very nice. So when you talk about resilience, how do you think you became resilient, or is it something that's in your DNA, Amanda?
It's partially in my DNA. I come from immigrant parents. You know, so all I ever saw them do was like resilience, you know, and strength and all that kind of stuff. So it's partially that. And it's also that my dreams were bigger than my problems. Yeah. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and you just stay focused on that, and that's that last characteristic you talked about there, that it isn't just about what you're doing, it's actually a channel for something bigger. And
yeah, this isn't about me and my ego, you know.
Right. And you know what you're creating for other people is, you know, pretty amazing. And it, you know, we talked at the beginning before we started is about how, you know, the purpose of helping people understand what this is and what they're working with is so important in the world. And it's just fantastic to have had this conversation with you, Amanda. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience? And please invite them to contact you, to follow you. We'll put all your connection notes in the show notes. But what would you say to the audience as we wrap up here?
I would say if you're going to start a business, get ready and enjoy the ride. And also realize that, honestly, I really do think that entrepreneurship is probably the best personal development training there is.
Yeah, it sure is.
Because you are forced to deal with your stuff, right? So if you don't want to deal with your stuff, don't get into entrepreneurship. It's not going to work out for you. But if you're willing to do that, and you're willing to sort of face your demons, and it's not just face your demons in entrepreneurship, it's also face your demons in other areas of your life, because it will affect your business.
Yeah, it will.
And vice versa.
Yeah, it just becomes part of everything, doesn't it? Yeah.
It becomes part of everything, right? And realizing that if you're not willing to do that, it's going to be very difficult for you. So there's a level of personal responsibility you must take. And it's not necessarily going to be easy, and it's not going to be comfortable, but it is so worth it.
Oh, it's so totally worth it. So that's interesting, Amanda, because when you've got a job, you can actually, I know people say, oh, yes, but I'm really caught up in my job and I feel that same level of responsibility. It's not the same, is it?
No, it's not. Not at all.
You can, to some point, shut it off, whereas when it's your own, you just can't.
You can't shut it off. And if you're like on mission and on purpose and in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing in the world, you literally cannot shut it off, right? It's impossible, because it's not that. I think this is where people get confused. They think like, oh, I am my job or I am my title. That's all ego. That's not what I'm talking about here. But I am talking that for a lot of people, and this is what I've noticed from all my clients, this isn't just about them making money. There's something bigger driving it. Yeah. You know, there's some sort of like, this is going to help change the world driving it little by little.
And if that's not driving it, then that shows up really quickly, doesn't it?
Very quickly, right? And it will destroy you real fast.
Because if it's just after the 6 figures or the dollars, that doesn't hold you for long.
Nope. No, I say it all the time. I'm like, listen, once your bills are paid, that's not what gets you out of bed.
Yeah, that's so true. Just
say that again. And you get lazy and you start backsliding. So you better find something bigger than just that.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a quotable quote, Amanda. I think we'll finish it. Just say that again for us and we'll finish.
Oh, that once your bills are paid, that's not what gets you out of bed to work.
It's not. It's truly not. Okay, Amanda, you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. It is almost light now here in Sydney. So the future is here. You're in Monday, we're in Tuesday.
Oh my goodness. That's what happens every time I talk to someone in Australia or New Zealand. I'm like, you guys are in the future.
I always think that's so cool. Okay, thank you so much for your time. What's the name of your program again?
Persuade to Profit is the name of our program. So if you go to amandaabella.com/apply, you'll find everything that you need to know about the program, what it is that we cover. There'll be client testimonials there. There's a really cool video there to check out. And then you can actually apply for a free complimentary call with me and my team. And we'll actually walk you through some of those questions like, what am I doing here? I have this idea. Is it, stuff like that we can help you with totally for free, and you can find out how to do it there.
There we go. So we'll share that, and thank you so much for your time, Amanda, and have a great 2019 as we career towards 2020. Who can believe it? It's just amazing, isn't it?
It is. The internet is amazing too. I sometimes think about that. I'm like, wait a minute, it's 5 a.m. where you are, 5:44, almost 6. It's like almost 2 p.m. here. And like before the internet, this would not have even been possible. Like, this is so crazy.
It is.
I think about that sometimes.
Yeah. And I just think, you and I now, I feel like I've known you for so long. I've read your things. I've spent 45 minutes with you. I feel such a privilege. And, you and I will be connected now forever because of this. And that's how the listeners will feel as they listen to you and listen to this conversation. It brings us, it's actually creating a much better world, I think, in so many ways.
I do too. And I think it's easy to forget that with all the craziness going on. But ultimately, like, we are progressing. It might look like we're regressing a little bit right now, but whoever said this stuff goes in a straight line, right?
It doesn't. No. These are the conversations that improve the world. And the more of these that there are out there, the more chance we have of having a better future. So, thanks so much for being part of that.
Oh, thank you so much for having me come on and be a part of that and do your part for it as well.
Thanks for listening. Amanda has a really special approach, and if you'd like to find out more about what she does and who she is, her contacts are in the show notes, www.amandaabella.com/apply. What are you taking away from this conversation? What's one really standout moment for you? You may want to scroll back and listen to parts of it again. I find this with many of the podcasts I listen to. The second time I listen, I hear things that I missed the first time. Like life, I guess. For everyone listening, whether this is your first episode or you've been with us for some time, I truly believe that whatever you're dreaming about can become real. These podcasts are designed to inspire, educate, and inform about what it takes to start, create, and grow a business of your own. We truly believe these podcast interviews provide terrific value, and if you agree, please leave your comments and rate the podcast over on iTunes. We know that this helps people find the show. Thanks so much. What questions do you have? How can I help you? Have you read the book? We're planning to set up a So You Want to Start a Business book club. Sort of something between a mastermind group, an accountability group, and a book club. So if you're interested to find out more about that, email me, ingrid@healthynumbers.com.au. Let me know what your questions are. I reply directly. I answer all my own email questions because it's important for you to have what you need as you get going in your business. As we always say, ideas without action, well, that's just what they are, ideas. What action are you inspired to take today? Till the next time, thanks so much for listening.